You see those days, I mean, in your opinion?
Principle.
No, in fact, how did you see it?
אני מדבר על שנת 33.
I speak of 1933.
לפני ה-1 באפריל,
Before the
שהתחילו
1st of
המאסרים,
April,
אלינו
before the
הגענו
arrest set in,
ידיעות על
we received
מאסרים,
news about arrests.
בהמוניהם,
Einzelaktionen mean
מדינאים,
individual
חברי
operations, not
הרייכסטאג, אלא
against the Reichstag
במיוחד
members, but
בערים
in particular
הקטנות
in
ובערים
small
הבינוניות.
towns and in
נאסרו
medium-sized
אנשים
towns.
רבים,
Considerable number of people were arrested without any reason whatever, and among them a considerable number of Jews, the rabbis, Jewish leaders, owners of shops, many Germans were very often informing on the Jews in order to get rid of them, and the Jews, as a result of the actions, were sent to the concentration camps. If they at all returned, they came back as broken people. I remember the first harrowing scenes when to our office flocked in women
שקיבלו בדואר את מיכל העפר של הבעלים שלהם שנספו במחנה הריכוז. מכתב מאוד קצר יומן an einem Herzschlag
and very often got simple news that the husband died of a heart attack and that the person had to collect the where the ashes were kept. The husband was killed as a result of a heart attack. We are sending to you the urn with ashes, and the remittance is 3 marks and a half. This is what the women would have to
Will you please explain what were the functions?
This was a division. There was a clear division of work between the Zionist organization on the one hand. It did the work of Zionist propaganda, etc. And the Israel office was responsible for the distribution of certificates which were given to us and all matters related to the immigration into Israel.
He asked to go to Israel, had to apply for Palestine at the time, had to apply to this office.
Immigration was supposed to approach our office. In 1933, I set up together with my friends all German towns, branches of our organization, most of the Jewish towns, to take off the load from the office in Berlin.
I wish to remind you that the 1st of April 1933, what can you tell the court about this day?
Yes.
להקדים כמה דברים על הפורגישיסט, על המבוא, על מה שקרה.
Preamble to what is going to be said.
בחודש
מרץ
התארגנה בניו יורק.
In New York, there was set up a special committee composed of Jews and non-Jews under the presidency of Rabbi Stephen Weiss, one of the greatest personalities of the American Torah, which declared upon the boycott of German goods. This came as a result of what happened in Germany about this was the protest against the arrests, the concentration camps, and all the iniquities I've already referred to. And as a response, as a reaction thereto, Julius Streicher, who was at that time Gauleiter of Franken, he declared at that time on the boycott of German Jewry up to the complete liquidation of business of the Jewish race. This was his expression. And he said that this happened after consultation with Hitler, Goebbels, and other of the Nazi luminaries. This preceded this matter. And on Friday,
this was
the first fateful day in our history of German Jewry. This was Friday Eve. I heard two speeches, most inciting and most instigating to iniquity by Goebbels, Goering, or both of them I do not remember. I do not remember who delivered the speech. And then finally came the surprise. The boycott day was established for 1 day, and they wanted to know what was the result, because the leaders, German leaders wanted to know whether the German Jewry would surrender and lift the boycott on German goods or not. If not, the boycott would continue in Germany. This was the first day of the boycott, a sample boycott, so to speak. And on Sunday, I was walking a few days, about 4 or 5 hours in the streets of Berlin. I toured almost all the districts. I walked all the districts in this very big city, and I saw this harrowing picture, which at that time was most shocking for us. All the shops, and also on my sign there was no Jew. On all the shops, on the shop windows, there were some slogans scrawled, there was the swastika, of course, Juda verrecke slogan, or Achtungsleben Juden raus, Achtung, Jützig nach Palästina, means beware of the danger, Jützig go to Palestine, there are tremors leading you to Jerusalem, and all others. Beware, it has already been translated by the interpreter. A road to Jerusalem was the last slogan. This was the harrowing situation. This was until night, and then next day on Monday, the normal situation was restored, and the boycott was lifted. The boycott was lifted, but it was said quite expressly that this was purely provisional.
Rosh בקרב
האוכלוסייה היהודית.
היהודית היה מדכא מאוד רוב היהודים יהודי גרמניה אשר ספגו תרבות גרמנית חונכו על כוחם הגדולים מן הספרות העם הגרמני הם לא האמינו מה שקרה שזה קרה להם היהודים האלה היו פה דרך כלל קשורים קשר הדוק עם העם הגרמני התנועה הציונית הייתה כבר היה מיעוט אז בגרמניה with the German people, the Zionist organization was in a minority. They constituted only 5% of the total Jewish German population, 1933. The Jews were assimilated and they didn't want to believe what actually happened to them. They couldn't have possibly believed that this cultured German nation, the one which was the most cultured of the peoples of the world since times immemorial, would resort to such iniquitous means.
Remember a special scene or a special instruction of the
pointing out, so far as the reaction was concerned, that in the first month there were many suicides of German Jews. From all towns of Germany, news was pouring in that a lawyer, so-and-so, or a doctor, or a great tradesman had done away with himself because he couldn't have possibly braved the situation, couldn't have put up with the humiliation, couldn't have possibly lived down the terrible situation. And this was that great depression
mental depression, and the Zionist organization was guiding to one solution. And the Zionist organization said it took the test. The Yiddish Rundschau was the official bulletin of the Zionist organization of Germany.
Why do you mention this paper now?
I recall this newspaper because this was the very first and perhaps the unique paper in Germany of all German papers that all spoke about the matter quite freely. And with regard to the Jews, with regard to the 1st of April, with regard to the boycott.
I am showing you a photostatic copy. Maybe you can identify this copy.
Yes, this is the number of Yiddish Rundschau. I see the headline, carry proudly the yellow badge. We translated it then into Hebrew when we showed it.
Robert
Welch, this was written by Robert Welch, the editor of Yiddish Rundschau.
In 1933,
he was the editor.
Please, may I be permitted to submit this photocopy, which was certified by the librarian of the Yad Vashem Institute, with a translation of 3 passages into the Hebrew. This is marked by the court as Exhibit T60. Can you, Mr. Cohen, read to the court 2 passages which in your opinion are characteristic of this article and the standing by the Zionist organization?
Some passages from the article in the German language, in the original language, of course.
Dass die Boykottleitung anordnete, an die boykottierten Geschäfte Schilder mit gelbem Fleck auf schwarzem Grund zu heften, ist ein gewaltiges Symbol. Diese Maßregel ist die Brandmarkung als Verächtlichmachung gedacht. Wir nehmen sie auf und wollen daraus ein Ehrenzeichen machen. Viele Juden hatten am Sonnabend ein schweres Erlebnis. Viele Juden hatten am Sonnabend ein schweres Erlebnis. Nicht aus innerem Bekenntnis, nicht aus Treue zur eigenen Gemeinschaft, nicht aus Stolz auf eine großartige Vergangenheit und Menschheitsleistung, sondern durch den Aufdruck des roten Zettels und des gelben Fleckes standen sie plötzlich als Juden da.
The President asks the witness to stop and let it be interpreted into the Hebrew.
The fact that the boycott authorities had decided to send signs on shops, the yellow badge on the black field is actually an honor for us. This is a sign of honor, not a sign of humiliation. Many Jews on this Saturday were depressed, not out of recognition of guilt, not out of faith to their community, not out of pride in the past, but this yellow badge, they had been singled out as Jews.
Beklebten Geschäfte und Schilder, bemalten die Fensterscheiben. 21 Stunden lang waren die deutschen Juden gewissermaßen an den Pranger gestellt. Neben anderen Zeichen und Inschriften sah man auf den Scheiben der Schaufenster vielfach einen großen Magen David, den Schildkönig Davids. Dies sollte eine Entehrung sein. Juden, nehmt ihn auf, in Fettdruck, den Davidsschild, und tragt ihn in Ehren.
House to house when it covered signs and painted on the window panes. For 24 hours, the Jews were to a certain extent put to the column of shame.
24 שעות.
For 24 hours, the Jews were put to the pillory of shame, and it seemed often one saw on the window panes near other writings also a large Magen David, the shield of David, and the intention was to, and it said, Jews, take this Magen David and carry it with pride.
Über die Judenfrage zu reden, galt noch vor 30 Jahren in gebildeten Kreisen als anstößig. Man betrachtete damals die Zionisten als Störenfriede mit einer Idee fix. Jetzt ist die Judenfrage so aktuell, dass jedes kleine Kind, jeder Schuljunge und der einfache Mann auf der Straße kein anderes Gesprächsthema hat. Allen Juden in ganz Deutschland wurde am 1. April der Stempel Jude aufgedrückt. Nach den neuen Anweisungen des Boykottkomitees soll, falls der Boykott erneuert wird, nur noch eine einheitliche Bezeichnung aller Geschäfte stattfinden. Bei Nichtjuden der Vermerk deutsches Geschäft, bei Juden einfach das Wort Jude. Man weiß, wer Jude ist. Ein Ausweichen oder Verstecken gibt es nicht mehr.
Before 30 years, the question about the Jewish problem was considered something against the good taste. The Zionists were regarded as peace-troubled people who have some sort of idea fix. And the Jewish question, however, has become so topical that it has become a daily conversation of every young boy, of every student, or every man in the street. All the Jews in all Germany, there was a stamp put on Jew. According to the new directive of the boycott authorities, there was one uniform mark of the Jew for the Jewish problem, of the Jewish shops. With the non-Jewish shops, it was written German shop, and with Jewish shops, it was written Jewish shop. Now it was, everybody knew who a Jew was. It was not possible to hide or conceal one's origins anymore.
Es ist der kurze Satz, den Moses zum Ägypter sprach. Ivri Anochi, ja, Jude. Zum Jude sein, ja sagen. Das ist der moralische Sinn des gegenwärtigen Geschehens. Die Zeit ist zu aufgeregt, um mit Argumenten zu diskutieren. Hoffen wir, dass eine ruhigere Zeit kommt und dass eine Bewegung, die ihren Stolz da reinsetzt, als Schrittmacherin der nationalen Erhebung gewürdigt zu werden, nicht ihr Gefallen daran findet, andere zu entwürdigen, selbst wenn sie meint, sie bekämpfen zu müssen. Aber wir Juden, unsere Ehre können wir verteidigen. Wir gedenken aller derer, die seit 5000 Jahren Juden genannt, als Juden stigmatisiert wurden. Man erinnert uns, dass wir Juden sind. Wir sagen Ja und tragen es mit Stolz.
The Jewish answer is clear. It is what Moshe said to the Egyptian. I am a Hebrew, and the moral value of this incident is this affirmative answer given to the question, does a Jew acknowledge his being a Jew? The times are too unrestful and we cannot begin an argument. Let us hope for peaceful times to come. Let us hope that a movement which takes pride as a pioneer to raise the pride of a nation will not find interest in the degradation of others, even if the movement considers that it has a fight on with this part of the people. But we, the Jewish people, will be able to defend our pride. We remember those the name Jew was given for 5,000 years. And was also meant in degradation. We remind and mention that we are Jews, and we shall say yes and carry our Judaism with pride. You, during those years, 33, until you left Germany, did you have any contacts with the German authorities in Berlin all the time?
Yes, in particular with the Ministry of Propaganda. I was in touch with the deputy of the chairman of the...
So that the amount that the people received in return for their money was less and less. And those who emigrated to other countries found that their lot was, from this point of view, even more difficult than those who emigrated to Palestine.
We spoke, Mr. Cohen, of the explanation of Jews of Polish citizenship at the end of the October 1938 of their evacuation. Will you please now come to November 1938? What do you remember?
In November, the 7th of November, in the evening papers there appeared the news of the shooting of the German councillor vom Rat by a young man at the German embassy in Paris. This was a great shock, and we expected that there would be serious consequences. We started holding various meetings and consultations in the Zionist organization and the Reichsvertretung, and we simply had to await developments.
Did you learn his name?
Yes, I believe that it was published at the time, Herschel Grünspan. Some years before that, a young Jew, Frankfurter, had shot at a Gauleiter at Davos.
The Gauleiter shot at the time.
The name of the Gauleiter was Gustloff. He shot at him and then handed himself over to the Swiss police and said that he had done what he had done as an act of vengeance for the severe crimes committed against the Jewish people. He is now in Israel. He was in prison until 1944.
What happened after the 7th of November 1938?
On the 9th of November in the evening, we received news that von Rat had died as a result of his injuries. And that night was the stormiest night of that whole period. It is called the Crystal Night, but this term certainly does not give any idea of the scope of what happened that night. That night, the attacks on the shop windows, on the Jewish shop windows began. There was terrible noise, and in the morning at 6 a.m. I was called to the telephone, and they told me that in the Meiniger Strasse, where the Zionist offices were, there was a band of people. I dressed immediately, and by the time I got there, people had already gone out, and I found my own office destroyed. There was a large notice put up there, and the telephones were cut. The notice said vengeance for von Rath. I went to the Reichsvertretung that morning. It was only 10 minutes or so away from the Meiningerstrasse, and there we had a consultation, and 2 representatives went out immediately to the Reichskanzlei to report on these events to the Secretary of State, Lamas, who was the right-hand man.
Do you remember who were these 2 representatives?
One of them was Hirsch, I think,
was one of them.
but I'm not sure. And Epstein. The Secretary of State did not receive them. He promised, he always said that whatever would happen,
Ruhe und Ordnung wird garantiert sein, den Juden. יבטיחו...
הסדר והשקט יובטחו.
he promised that order would be maintained. They were not received by the State Secretary and returned. And everybody connected with the Reichsvertretung received telephone calls from all over the country that that very night gangs of people had not only entered private flats and destroyed whatever they could, but they had also taken away the mails to the police, and people thought that this was a matter of concentration camps. These were civilians.
They said that they thought it was the concentration camps. Who thought so?
These were our representatives. The representatives of all our offices, the Palestine office, the Jewish communities and so on. I remember speaking to the Breslau community and the Frankfurt community. I was present there. In all these cities there was the very same picture. This breaking into Jewish homes, smashing up the furniture and taking away the male members of the family to an unknown place, and people thought that it was to a concentration camp. In Berlin this began only in the middle of the day. On the 10th of November, about 2 p.m., I received a telephone call about the arrest of a friend of mine who is now an ambassador for the State of Israel. He was the only Jew who had been arrested in Berlin.
I did not quite follow.
איזה שגריר? מי זה?
He was the first man to be arrested.
Who are you speaking of?
His name is Dr. Kurt Levin. I think he is now our ambassador in Tokyo. This I remember well, and I decided not to await what was my fate. They would obviously arrest me. We'd always try to continue our work, but in a concentration camp one certainly couldn't do this. Therefore I went to some apartment in one of the suburbs, and from this place, together with many others, we administered whatever we could of our affairs. Tension was great during the day, and during both those days we heard that they were hunting Jews in the streets. They had to fill up a certain quota. Every policeman apparently was given the duty of bringing in so many people according to statistics. And if they didn't find the people that they were looking for, they just picked up passers-by in order to fill the quota. At that time, reference was made to a figure of some 30,000 males until the 20th of November.
You mean that these arrests continued from the 10th up to the 20th of November, 10 days?
Yes, that's so. That is so. And at the time of arrest, every prisoner was told that if he would prove that he was going to leave Germany, he would be released. That was the information given to them. This caused a tremendous amount of scurrying around. Our own offices were closed. Kochman came and closed down the Meinigerstrasse offices, but some days later I was summoned to the place, to the hiding place, and I signed minutes.
The office of the Reichsvertretung were closed.
All the offices of the Jewish community were sealed off, and then all our rescue work took place in secret from private apartments. This was the time when our women folk rescued the men and tried to save them. Not everybody escaped. This was the coldest winter that I can ever remember experiencing in Germany, and the first news came of the death of people and the dispatch of ashes in urns and so on. Our women folk stood in long queues outside the various foreign consulates in order to secure papers for entry to other countries. And I must state, and this is well known, a planet without visa. There were very few countries which were prepared to give visas. We were in a state of despair.
What happened if a woman did succeed to obtain a visa?
If she succeeded in getting such a visa, this visa was transmitted to the man, to the police, or to the concentration camp, and the man was released. He was told he had to leave the country within a limited period of time.
Do you remember the names of the concentration camps where Jews were concentrated, arrested during those 10 days?
If I'm not mistaken, there was Dachau, Buchenwald, and Sachsenhausen.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, will you please take the official gazette for 1938, the German official gazette?
בעמוד 1579.
In order to give them a legal status so that it would be possible for them to concentrate, to channel most of the questions related to them, that means to say the Jewish school, welfare problems and all other questions, and that there should be a legal custodian of Jews who had still remained in Germany.
May I ask you, Mr. Cohen, to read Paragraph 4 of this 10th
Die Reichsvereinigung untersteht der Aufsicht des Reichsministers des Innern. Ihre Satzung bedarf seiner Genehmigung.
The Association of Reich is subjected to the supervision of the Minister of Reich for the Interior, and the regulation is to be approved by the Minister of Reich. After some weeks, offices were opened, a few weeks after the enactment of this particular law. After the 10th of November, after the pogrom which took place on that date, centers then were opened, not political organizations, not the Zionist organizations and other organizations of this kind, but only the administrative organizations of Jews. For instance, the Palestina was open.
המשרד הארץ ישראלי נפתח
the Palestinian office was reopened.
הסתדרות הציונית.
Organization office was remained closed.
When I entered this office after some time, the first time that I ordered the call for Jerusalem, and I got on the line the Jewish agency in Jerusalem, and I asked Mr. Moshe Sharotov, who was then the political department of the Jewish agency, and I told him I had to conduct the conversation in a very cautious manner because it was quite obvious that it was being tapped, and that the enemy was eavesdropping. And I said only a few words. I first of all jotted them down in order to prove what I'd said. Mr. Shatov, SOS, this is what I said. SOS, of course, is known to anyone. Save our souls. 40,000 males in concentration camps. Send us immediately some help.
פיקוח נפש בעברית?
בעברית, כן.
In Hebrew, I use the word before.
I said in Hebrew, save their souls.
Dr. Georg Landau, the head of the German Department of the Jewish Agency, also spoke to me, and both of them assured me that they would do their utmost in order to send certificates. But to our great regret, the results yielded were extremely insignificant. In spite of all this, we were able to bring to Israel a considerable number of Jews. But this was due to a man who, in my opinion, is one of the greatest among the nations of the world. I'm speaking to Captain Vorley, British Passport Control Officer, the first passport officer who was working at Tiergartenstrasse at the British consulate in Berlin, and he did everything in his power in order to enable us to bring over as many Jews as possible into Israel. He held all the categories, and one can say that he rescued thousands of Jews from the jaws of death.
Can you now speak of your second meeting with Adolf Eichmann?
Yes. The second encounter I had may be based on may be described on the material I prepared and what is not Eichmann began the conversation. In front of him there were documents actually taken as clippings from the Pariser Tageblatt, from a French paper published by the immigrants. We hadn't seen this paper in Germany. Apparently its dissemination was banned. He was terribly excited, he was very angry that we had published on him a certain article in the paper, and he read some of the passages from this particular passage. He was styled as Bloodhound Eichmann. It was styled in a colloquial language, a new foe of glory. I do not remember the epithets, but those were extremely stern epithets. He said that one of us had given the spurious information about him through the French immigrant paper. He spoke about Dr. Landau.
זה כלב הדמים אייקמן, בבלוט unterlaufene Augen, עיניים שטופות דם.
ואז הוא אמר שדוקטור לנדאו, מנהל איטה, היה בברלין כמה ימים, בוודאי לא נתנו את האינפורמציה הזאת, מי פה נתן את הדבר, מי נתן את הפרסום הזה, זו היה השאלה הראשונה, במצב מאוד מתוח וצעק עלינו, ואיים עלינו בכל האמצעים שבידיו.
by all means
אף אחד מאיתנו הודע שהוא נתן אינפורמציה, זה ברור היה.
admitted that he gave the information. Nobody confessed anything to do, and this was the first item.
אז פנה לנקודה השנייה
Then he went over to a second item of the agenda of this particular meeting.
הוא הפנה אלינו
He
לגבי הביקור שלנו בווינה.
spoke to us with regard to our visit to
צריך
Vienna.
כאן לקבוע מה שאולי עדים אחרים עוד יספרו, שאייכמן הזמין נציגי מוסדות יהודים גרמנים לווינה, שהם יכירו שמה את המוסד הזה, צנטרל שטלף יהודיש האוסוונדרום. זה צריך להיות, אני הייתי חולה כאשר במיטה זה היה בחורף, דצמבר, ינואר, פברואר, דצמבר 88 או ינואר 9, אני יכול לקבוע זאת. אני לא השתתפתי יותר, חייבתי במיטה, ואחרים השתתפו בדבר הזה, והוא פנה את החברים האחרים, אפשטיין, שהיו בווינה, כולם האחרים היו כולם בווינה, וצעק להם ופנה אליהם בצורה התקיפה ביותר. אמר, מדוע אתם פגעתם באיסור המפורש שהוצאתי שאתם לא צריכים לבוא במגע עם היהודים בווינה, עם המנהיגים היהודים בווינה. זה היה אסור בהחלט, ועשיתם זאת להשתמש בביטויים מאוד מאוד חריפים, בגסים, סרטטים, חזרנו, שתיל, סגנון אחר לגמרי. זה לא היינו רגילים לו. והוא הציף אותנו בהאשמות בשטח הזה שאנחנו פה הפרנו את האיסור לבוא במגע עם נציגי יהודי ווינה. זה היה פה שנים. אז עמד מישהו, אני חושב, שטל או אפשטיין, עמדו מקומם ואמרו, אם אנחנו, אחרי מה שקרה, מבקרים בווינה, אנחנו רשאים, זה רק אנושי, שאנחנו נבוא במגע עם החברים לצער שלנו שמה, כדי להכין אותם, אם נפגעו על הגורל הזה, בזמן קצר, אנחנו היינו כבר בשלטון הזה, זמן רב מאוד, מאוד טבעי ואנושי, לבוא במגע איתם, ואתה צריך להבין, להבין זאת.
comfort them at that time. It was Stahl or Epstein, I do not remember which of them took part in that conversation. Eichmann then wound up the meeting with the following words. After so many years, there are blood in my memory, but they said, you will go to Konzertlager, they said. This was the vulgar term for concentration camp. Konzertlager was used vulgarly by the SS circle. Do you remember him using this term, Konzertlager? He several times used the word Konzertlager.
עכשיו יצאה מר היינריך שטל,
Mr. Heinrich Stahl was in a way attacking him. He stood up and said that we all are interested as Gestapo is in mass emigration, mass exodus from Germany. But you are going to frustrate our efforts by the transports outside the borders. Because of that, transports of Jews to the neighboring countries set in, to Holland, to Belgium, to Finland. I do not know whether to France, but to other countries as well, in the north of Europe and in the west of it.
and by
these means of these
נשלחו בחזרה, חלקים מהם, חלק של האנשים הספיק להישאר בארץ, הסתתר שם, חלק אחר הוחזר לגרמניה, רבים מהם נשארו בשטח הפקר, ואחרים נכנסו עברו לכלא או למחנה הגרמני. ומה היה התוצאה מכך שהמעצמות האלו, המדינות האלו אשר לא היו כל כך נדיבות עם ויזות, גם סגרו את האפשרות הזאת ומאוד הגבילו את ההגירה. משפט כשהוא פנה על זה על זה הגיב אייכמן בכל החריפות.
To this Eichmann reacted very sternly.
במינים, סליחה?
על השמדת הניירות.
כן, כל שבוי.
במחצית השעה הזאת
you destroyed the papers because you already had experience.
Of course, when people are arrested, then all the documents are being examined. The pockets are being searched and papers might be taken out which might be of an incriminating nature. I remember that when I was arrested for the first time and I had some papers on which I couldn't comment and they were regarded as documents. And all the papers were to be destroyed. Yes, we did it in a few minutes.
אחרי חצי שעה בערך, אחרי חצי שעה, חזרנו לחדר הזה, ואייכמן לא דיבר כלל על הנושא הזה, לא על הנושא וינה,
neither on Vienna nor on the subject brought forward by Heinrich Stahl and Theresa Stahl. He doesn't speak either. Then he spoke about an entirely different matter. He announced us that the authorized organizations are about to set up in the competent authorities, that the competent authorities are about to set up in Berlin a central office for Jewish immigration based on the example of Vienna, where a similar institution existed. He described to us again the central this was the central office of immigration, and in Bindling was 16 Kurfürstenstraße. This was a building of some sort of a lodge, and he described to us again the process of preparatory operations. Our friends already knew the situation from what existed in Vienna. He again said what he said it before. That the Jew enters and in the end he goes out with all the documents in his hands. I do not remember exactly, but I believe that this is Kurfürstenstraße number 16, but I do not remember clearly. It's blood in my mind.
He told us
that he wanted to open it within a few days. Let me say at a very short notice, and he told us that we are responsible.
We knew more or less the rank of Eichmann. I do not remember what rank he held at the time.
Ich habe den Zeugen so verstanden, dass ohne genau zu wissen, ob es Eichmann war, sah, dass es ein Mann in einem erheblich niedrigeren Rang war, obwohl in Zivil war.
I understand the witness to say that he למרות שלא הכיר את אייכמן,
although he
חשב
did not recognize
שזהו אייכמן,
Eichmann, thought that this was Eichmann,
הוא חשב שהוא בדרגה יותר נמוכה.
he thought that he was in a lower rank.
מוחלטת, אני מצטער, טעות מצערת. אנחנו ידענו שזה אייכמן, ובין היתר מכך שהוא התחיל לקרוא לנו את הקטעים על המעשים שלו בפריז הטאגבלט, או איזה מיגרנט נמצא איתו. הוא קרא על אייכמן, ואני גם הכרתי אותו מן הפגישה הראשונה, זה היה אייכמן, אפשטיין ושטל, כולם הכירו אותו.
דרגתו ידעתם?
דרגתו ידענו, תמיד זה היה בגרמניה, תמיד הדרגה, כמו בישראל, תמיד שטורמבנפויר, אולטרשטורמבנפויר, לויטננט וכו', זה היה חלק של השיט.
הייתם בקיאים בדרגות של ה-SS?
Were you familiar with the SS ranks as the presiding judge?
Learned it during that period.
Ist diese Erregung entstanden durch die Vorlesung der Artikel, wo er als Bluthund bezeichnet war?
האם נולדה התרגשות זאת על ידי הקריאה בקול של המאמרים בהם הוא תואר ככלב דם?
Reading out of the article in which he was described as a bloodhound.
My answer is yes, says the witness.
Hat man im Ergebnis aber den Vortrag in Ruhe angehört, der von der jüdischen Seite vorgebracht wurde?
אולם האם כתוצאה מכך האזינו בשקט לדברים אשר הורצו מן הצד היהודי?
Statements which were made on the Jewish side.
היה הרושם, אבל זה סובייקטיבי מאוד, שהקצין הזה הוא ריסן אותו, הוא המתין אותו באיזשהו אז עשה אותו יותר מתון, שהיה ממונה עליו, אבל בוודאי הרתיחה באה מן הביטויים במאמר הזה, לא ספק.
Waren die Ausführungen, die von jüdischer Seite gemacht wurden, nicht sehr kühn in einem Gestapo-Raum und konnte das nicht dazu führen, dass die Erregung gesteigert wurde?
האם לא היו פרטי הדברים אשר הושמעו על ידי הצד היהודי נועזים קצת לגבי חדר גסטאפו, כך שהם היו להעלות את החימה?
זו שאלה של מוסר ציבורי. ראינו את עצמנו כנציגי היהדות הגרמנית מאוד מאוד קשה, וחשבנו שאנחנו צריכים להביע מה שעם ליבנו. תכין שזה מעט נועז, חששנו כולנו לעצירה, למאסרים, אבל כנראה זה לא הוחלט.
It seems that this decision was not made, but the language used was very daring.
כן, כולנו ציפינו למעצר, זה משהו.
כן, למעצר. חשבנו שאנחנו חייבים זאת לתפקיד שלה. להשיב ולהגיד. מה שסטאר אמר לו אמר באוז רוח נפשי גדול. הוא היה היריב הפנימי שלנו של הציונים, הוא לא היה ציוני, אנטי ציוני אולי. אבל הכרנו בדבר בהעזה שלו, כוח העזה שלו, שהוא ביטא מה שהיה עם ליבו. והטרנספורטים האלו הם גרמו נזק רב להגירה התקינה.
To the immigration, to the orderly immigration of Jews.
Sie befürchten eine Verhaftung. Ist irgendetwas daraufhin veranlasst worden, auf das kühne und energische Auftreten von irgendeiner Stelle, also eventuell von Eichmann?
חששתם מפני מעצר. האם נעשה על ידי איזושהי רשות או אולי על ידי אייכמן משהו בעקבות ההתנהגות הנועזת והתקיפה?
In consequence of your daring statements.
I know nothing of such steps being taken.
Danke, ich habe keine Frage mehr.
תודה, אין לי עוד שאלות.
I have no more questions, says Dr. Servati.
כמה זמן אחרי
Judge Rave, how long after this conversation did you leave Germany?
אני לא יכול בדיוק להגיד מתי, אבל שבועות לאחר מכן.
But a few weeks after the meeting.
כמה שבועות, שבועיים, שלושה שבועות, שבוע אחד אפילו.
3 weeks is the answer, or maybe 1 week. Judge Rave, 1 to 3
לא
weeks.
רשמנו דברים כאלו.
Yes, we never made a note of such matters because there was strict checking on the border.
Judge Halevi, Mr. Cohen, you recall at the time of the burning of the synagogue in Berlin, the Jews took out the scrolls of the law. Yes, answers Mr. Cohen. Judge Halevi,
האם זה היה היחס הרגיל של ההמון הגרמני לרדיפת יהודים, או האם הייתה הרדיפה מוגבלת לשלטונות הגרמנים?
In a state of excitement, was this the usual attitude of the German people?
בזמן ההוא היינו די מנותקים מהנוצרים, היינו במחבואים, היו רדיפות ברחובות, והקשר שלנו היה...
Judge Halevi, Mr. Cohen, you recall at the time of the burning of the synagogue in Berlin, the Jews took out the scrolls of the law. Yes, answers Mr. Cohen. Judge Halevi, you saw a large number of Germans
או האם הייתה הרדיפה מוגבלת לשלטונות הגרמנים?
In a state of excitement, was this the usual attitude of the German people?
Difficult to answer because at the time we had no connections with the Christians. There were persecutions going on the street, and our contact was very weak. I was told from a third or fourth source, kind of hearsay, that there were religious Christians who said, today it is the synagogues, and where the turn of the churches will come. I did not hear it with my own ears, but I was told that Christians did express such opinions. Judge Halevi, this was in 38, witness 38, 39. I did not hear it with my own ears, but this was of a second or third source. Judge Halevi,
I did not refer only to this particular incident of the burning of the synagogue. You were in Germany from 1933 to 1939, and you said you left Berlin often on journeys to other cities. You certainly must have come into contact not only with Jews, and not only with Nazi officials. Therefore, I am asking you, what was the average attitude of Germans who were not Jews and were not officials of the regime?
It must be said that I did not have much contact with Christians at the time. There was already segregation, and he who did not live during those days, there was a serious partition or a wall between Gentiles and Jews. I cannot remember speaking to a Christian during all my journeys over Germany. From the train, I used to go to a meeting, sat with the social workers of the Jewish congregation, and I had to speak about our own matters.
Judge Halevi, did you never come across any expressions of opposition to the persecutions of the Jews?
I did not come upon such expressions, but I had no contact with Gentiles during that period.
האם אתה יכול להגיד לנו
Presiding
מה
Judge,
היה מספר
can you
העולים
tell
לארץ
us
ישראל
what were the number of immigrants from Germany to Palestine in the period 1933 until the time you left Germany?
Yes, the statistics did not function properly, and there is a difference of opinion. Some mention 60,000 and some mention 100,000. These are only, there was the wish of all the Jews in Berlin and the provinces. There were telegrams and telephone calls I had to answer day and night and overcome all those calls. There was an enormous demand for immigration, but we could not fulfill all the requests. Later he said that this must be put right, that immigration must be accelerated at all costs and by all means.
Ihr müsst auf Touren kommen. זאת אומרת בעברית,
עליכם להגביר את הקצב.
He said you must accelerate the tempo of the immigration. The witness wanted to use the same word used by the accused. And the accused said, I demand that I receive 1,000 passports every day. This will be the minimum quota. The chairman of the Jewish community tried to explain to the accused that there are many factors which do not enable us to carry out this quota. There is great excitement and the will to immigrate, but it is just impossible. The accused said he has no interest in this. This does not concern him. The details do not concern him. If there are no ways of immigrating, we should see to that and find the ways and supply 1,000 passports daily. Then he went over to the financial field and said, you must, if the situation in Berlin improves, you must in future collect a travel tax, an immigration tax. We said that as far as we understand the order, we must use those monies to finance immigration of Jews from Germany. To this he retorted in a very high voice that this does not come into account. I wish to quote him, although they were very rude.
Wovon sollen wir eure alten Säcke ernähren? Wie sollen wir dann eure alten Säcke ernähren?
Wherefrom are we to feed your old sacks? And then he continued and said that the system in Vienna is very effective, advised us and told us that if we stay on a day or two in Vienna to learn conditions there and to learn the system which he was praised, the system which brought results, better results than in Berlin. And later, this was the conclusion of this meeting.
How did he speak? What was his behavior during the course of the conversation?
All the conversation was in very rude language. All the atmosphere was very inconvenient, and all those who came were very disappointed and depressed because we realized that all this matter of asking to copy the system followed in Vienna, we saw a change of the policy for the future regarding the immigration from Germany. And we saw it with great concern. At the end of this conversation, he concluded saying, I invited you here as representatives of German Jewry. You who are present here will be in future responsible for the implementation of this operation in the spirit I pointed out. Otherwise, you know what your fate will be. This was the conclusion of this conversation, and I believe we stayed a half a day or another day in Vienna. We contacted the Jewish community and the Palestine office in Vienna to hear what was going on there, and went back to Germany, all of us under the impression that the position in the old Reich was desperate. Still, there was a great difference between the situation of the Jews in Vienna at that time and the situation of the Jews in the Old Reich, in all respects. This we saw on every step. In conversations we held later, we learned the efficiency of the accused. And while in the Old Reich the process ended up to 1933, there were quieter periods and more unrestful periods.
Mr. Lindenstrauss. Dr. Servatius. Presiding Judge, any questions, Dr. Servatius? Dr. Servatius, I have no questions to this witness. I did not exactly understand what was said about the travel tax. What was the idea?
The idea was that each man who is granted a passport by this new office, in Vienna it already existed, and he wanted that we have the same office also in Berlin, that this office collects from every Jew granted a passport of immigration